Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The unexpected distraction. Elon Musk had grown accustomed to the demands of his life, the never-ending meetings, the pressing issues surrounding the development of the Tesla Cybertruck, and the steady march of progress at SpaceX. He was a man who thrived under pressure, who saw the impossible and made it possible. But even Elon Musk, for all his incredible achievements, wasn't immune to the occasional distraction that pulled him away from his meticulously planned schedule. It was on one of those rare moments, in the midst of his usual routine, that he encountered something that would forever change his perspective. It was a typical afternoon in Austin, Texas, where the sun blazed in the sky, casting long shadows on the bustling streets. Elon was in his Tesla Cybertruck, its angular, futuristic design cutting through the city with an air of authority. He was on his way to a crucial video conference about the Cybertruck's production, an important conversation with his team about finalizing the prototype. As the electric vehicle hummed quietly beneath him, he adjusted the dashboard screen, ensuring that the right faces were appearing on his video call. A familiar voice, that of his chief engineer, spoke up. "Elon, we've been making significant strides with the exoskeleton design. The durability is unmatched, but we need to fine-tune the external dimensions. We're almost ready for a demo next month." Elon nodded, his focus entirely on the conversation, his mind racing through the possibilities. The design needs to scream power, but it must remain functional. It's about showing the world that durability doesn't mean sacrificing innovation. The conversation flowed smoothly as they discussed the technicalities of the vehicle. Elon's mind, though constantly engaged, was in its element, mapping out the future of transportation, defining what the next great step in automotive history would look like. He was passionate about pushing the boundaries of what electric vehicles could achieve. Still, in the back of his mind, something nagged at him, a feeling, a sense of restlessness, though he couldn't place its origin. The Cybertruck cruised through the intersection, and it was there, for just a brief moment, that Elon's attention was caught, not by the technology he had worked so tirelessly to bring to life, but by something unexpected, something completely out of place in his polished world of sleek designs and futuristic ideas. In the middle of the street, a young girl in a bright red dress stood out like a flame against the dull urban backdrop. Her dress, though striking, appeared worn, frayed at the edges, faded from constant exposure to the sun. She was holding a tin can in her hands, shaking it intermittently, and the sound of coins clinking against its metal walls rang through the air. The crowd around her was unlike any Elon had seen before, an odd mix of curiosity and anticipation, with many people holding their phones up, as if waiting to capture something extraordinary. Elon's initial reaction was one of skepticism. What was this girl doing on the corner? Was she a street performer, or was she begging? But as the car rolled forward, he felt a strange tug at his heart. Something about the scene didn't sit right with him. The crowd's behavior felt rehearsed, almost staged. There was a certain tension in the air, a collective holding of breath, as if everyone present knew something that Elon did not. "Are you still with us, Elon?" The voice from his video call snapped him back to the present, breaking his focus. He hadn't realized the light had turned green, and the cars behind him were now honking impatiently. Elon quickly pressed the accelerator and moved the Cybertruck forward, forcing himself to focus on the conversation once more. "Apologies, just a momentary distraction. Let's continue." But even as he resumed his discussion with the team about battery efficiency and production timelines, the image of the girl in the red dress lingered in his mind. There was something unsettling about the whole situation, something that didn't make sense in his typically structured world. By the time the video conference had ended, and he'd made a few decisions regarding the final stages of the Cybertruck's development, Elon realized that he could no longer shake the feeling that he needed to know more about the girl and the strange scene he had witnessed. Was this some sort of social experiment? Or was there something deeper, something more hidden, that he hadn't yet uncovered? With a sudden shift in priorities, Elon made a decision. Rather than heading directly back to the Tesla factory, he would take a detour. Something in his gut told him that the scene he had witnessed earlier was important, that there was more to this story than met the eye. As the Cybertruck continued down the road, his thoughts drifted back to the girl in the red dress. Was she just a child performing for attention, or was there something darker at play? His mind raced with possibilities, the urge to understand this strange situation growing stronger by the second. It was the kind of mystery that called to him, a puzzle that, if left unsolved, would continue to gnaw at him. "Let's see what's going on," he muttered to himself, his jaw set with determination. Elon Musk, after all, was no stranger to chasing down answers, whether it was solving complex problems in space or unraveling the truth behind an enigmatic scene on the streets of Austin. As the Cybertruck turned back toward the intersection, he felt a surge of anticipation. What would he find when he returned? Would the girl still be there? And if she was, what story would unfold? His fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter, the electric motor of the truck humming quietly as he sped toward what might be the most unexpected and life-changing discovery of his day. Uncovering the truth. The streets of Austin began to take on a different feel as Elon steered the Cybertruck back toward the intersection where he had seen the girl. The once bustling, modern cityscape now seemed almost surreal, as if the buildings and cars around him were merely backdrops to something more significant, something that had yet to reveal itself. The traffic flowed predictably, but Elon's mind was anything but calm. Each passing moment felt like a step closer to unraveling a mystery that, for reasons he couldn't fully understand, had taken hold of him. As the Cybertruck's distinctive angular form turned the corner and approached the intersection, Elon's eyes scanned the area. The midday sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the sidewalk, but there was no sign of the crowd. The mass of people that had gathered earlier had dispersed, leaving only a handful of pedestrians crossing the road. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as if the whole scene had been a figment of his imagination. But then, there she was. The girl in the red dress. Elon slowed the truck and parked at the curb, his pulse quickening with a sense of urgency. The girl stood alone now, her tiny figure framed against the fading sunlight, holding the same worn tin can in her hands. The dress she wore, though vibrant in color, was clearly not new. It was frayed at the edges, with small patches of dirt and grime from what looked like long days spent on the streets. Her posture was weary, her small frame slightly hunched, but her face was still a picture of quiet determination. Elon studied her from behind the tinted windows of the Cybertruck. The girl was shaking the can gently, producing a faint metallic rattle that cut through the ambient noise of the city. People passed by without giving her a second glance, oblivious to the silent interaction unfolding just a few feet away. Something about her presence felt wrong, in the way that an unspoken tension in the air can make you uneasy, even if you don't know exactly why. The girl's expression, though calm, held an underlying sadness that spoke volumes without a single word. She had the look of someone who had endured hardship, someone who had been forced to grow up far too quickly. Elon felt his curiosity swell into something more, a need to understand, to know who this girl was and what brought her to this street corner. Why had she been the center of such attention earlier? And why, despite her apparent poverty, did she seem so composed, as if playing a role that required far more than a child should be expected to carry? He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a pair of dark sunglasses and a baseball cap. While Elon Musk was certainly accustomed to attention, he knew that his presence in this neighborhood, especially in such a conspicuous vehicle, would draw unwanted eyes. If he was going to approach the girl without making a scene, he needed to blend in, to go unnoticed. His disguise wasn't much, but it would do. As he stepped out of the Cybertruck, the heat of the afternoon sun hit him immediately. The air felt thick and heavy, a stark contrast to the cool, climate-controlled interior of his vehicle. Elon moved quickly, his sneakers barely making a sound against the pavement as he walked toward the girl. His heart beat a little faster with each step, but there was a calm resolve in his movements. He had made the decision to uncover the truth, and now he had to follow through. The girl noticed him as he approached, her eyes flicking up from her tin can to his face. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of caution and resignation. It was clear she had seen her fair share of strangers, but there was something in her gaze that made Elon pause. She wasn't scared of him, she wasn't even curious. She had likely grown accustomed to people who simply walked by, too absorbed in their own lives to notice the people around them. Elon stopped a few feet away from her, careful not to get too close. He didn't want to intimidate her, but he also didn't want to come off as distant. He needed to speak to her, to understand what had driven her to perform like this, what had brought her to stand at the intersection, in front of a crowd, with a tin can. "Hey," Elon said softly, his voice low but warm. "I noticed you earlier. Are you all right?" The girl looked at him for a moment before shaking her head, a subtle but definitive gesture. She didn't answer him, but there was something in her silence that told Elon she didn't want to talk to him. Her eyes flickered back to the street, her gaze distant as if she were lost in thought, or perhaps hoping he would just go away. Before Elon could ask another question, he heard a voice calling out from behind him. A woman appeared in his peripheral vision, walking briskly toward them. She was dressed in a smart blouse and jeans, but her appearance, like the girl's, had a certain weariness about it. Around her neck hung a professional-grade camera, the kind that might be used by a journalist or someone who regularly documented events. "There you are, sweetie. Great job today," the woman said, smiling brightly, though Elon could sense a slight nervousness in her demeanor. Elon turned toward her, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. She spoke with a polished, rehearsed tone, as if she had prepared this moment in advance. The woman reached out to take the girl's hand, leading her gently away from Elon. "I'm so sorry if my daughter bothered you," she said, her smile still intact, but now tinged with an almost forced cheerfulness. "It's just part of a school project, you know, a social experiment to observe public reactions to child beggars. We're filming it for her class." The explanation came too easily, too smoothly, as though she had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Elon felt a flicker of doubt rising within him. A school project? He had to admit, the idea of such an elaborate experiment, especially involving a child on the streets, seemed far-fetched. There were too many questions left unanswered. Why was the girl in such worn clothes if this was just a project? And why had so many people been drawn to her? "Really?" Elon said, his tone skeptical but polite. "That's quite an elaborate setup for a homework assignment. Why collect actual money from people?" The woman's smile faltered for just a second, but it was enough for Elon to notice. "Oh, well, we're donating all the funds to local homeless charities. It's part of the project's ethical considerations," she said quickly, almost too quickly, as if she were trying to cover a crack in her story. "Which charities?" Elon pressed, his curiosity only growing. The woman stiffened slightly, her grip on the girl's hand tightening. "Various local organizations. We haven't finalized the list yet," she replied, her voice slipping into an almost robotic tone. "But if you'll excuse us, we really must be going. We have to get home and edit the videos. Homework's due tomorrow, after all." Before Elon could ask another question, the woman had already started walking away, guiding the girl toward a nearby alleyway. Elon watched them go, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. The woman's explanation, polished as it was, didn't add up. And the more he thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle refused to fit together. He glanced back at the intersection, his mind working furiously. There was something about the whole situation that felt off, something hidden beneath the surface of what appeared to be a harmless school project. The professional camera equipment, the girl's ragged clothing, and the girl's lack of emotion, it all seemed too orchestrated, too artificial. Elon stood there for a moment longer, contemplating his next move. He could just walk away, write it off as a strange encounter. But that wasn't his style. He didn't leave questions unanswered. Not when they gnawed at him like this. He turned on his heel and walked back to the Cybertruck, his mind racing. The sun beat down on him, but the heat didn't seem to matter. He was consumed by the mystery. He had come to Austin to attend a business meeting, to discuss the future of Tesla's Cybertruck, but it seemed that the real journey had only just begun. As he slid back into the driver's seat, he knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A deeper search. Elon Musk's mind buzzed with questions as he sat in the driver's seat of the Cybertruck. His hands gripped the steering wheel with a mix of determination and uncertainty. He hadn't expected to be entangled in something like this today, but as he stared out through the windshield, the questions only grew louder. The girl in the red dress, her weary eyes, the woman who claimed to be her mother, the bizarre social experiment they were filming, it was all too neatly packaged, too rehearsed. Something about it didn't sit right, and Elon knew from experience that when something didn't add up, the best course of action was to dig deeper. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, the hum of the electric motor vibrating through the cabin. The Cybertruck's futuristic design contrasted sharply with the gritty surroundings of the neighborhood. As he drove, the cityscape of Austin began to change before his eyes. The polished streets and glass towers of downtown had given way to rundown buildings, neglected storefronts, and homes that looked like they hadn't been cared for in years. He had an instinctive understanding of this area, its struggles, its hidden realities. It wasn't the kind of place he normally visited, nor did he want to. His life was rooted in innovation and tech, the kind of world where everything was clean, efficient, and high performance. But this felt different. The girl and her supposed mother had led him here, and despite all his instincts telling him to turn around, Elon felt compelled to follow them. It wasn't about charity or social experiments anymore. This was something bigger. The idea that this girl, this child, could be placed into such an exploitative situation stirred something deep inside of him. He couldn't walk away from it. Not yet. The streets became more desolate as he ventured further. Small groups of people lingered on street corners, watching as the city's bustle gave way to the quiet hum of a struggling community. Elon was keenly aware of the contrast between this area and the tech utopia he built in his other companies, the contrast between the polished glamour of Silicon Valley and the raw reality of this place. He was no stranger to inequality. He had built companies that changed the world, but even with all his success, he had never been blind to the disparities that existed in the world. His ventures, from SpaceX to Tesla, were designed to address grander challenges, from advancing humanity to exploring the stars. But now, he found himself drawn into a much smaller but no less important mystery, one that needed resolution. As he slowed the Cybertruck to a crawl, he could see the woman and the girl up ahead, walking down the sidewalk. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement, and the atmosphere felt heavier now, charged, almost oppressive. Elon took a sharp turn, pulling the truck into a narrow side street. He parked under the cover of a large oak tree, its branches offering some shade from the evening heat. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, save for the distant sound of dogs barking and faint music drifting from a nearby house. Elon waited in the shadow of the tree, his thoughts racing. He needed a better angle, a way to observe without being noticed. He couldn't risk tipping them off. If this was some kind of operation, then the last thing he wanted was for the woman and the girl to become aware of his pursuit. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Elon didn't take his eyes off the woman and the girl as they walked toward a small, dilapidated building at the end of the street. The structure was modest at best, just a one-story house with peeling paint and a broken porch light flickering in the evening breeze. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end of the line, where the trail would finally lead. The woman and the girl entered the building without looking around. Elon felt a jolt of excitement mixed with trepidation. He had followed them this far, and now he had to act. He couldn't let them slip through his fingers. But he also had to be careful. If he barged in too quickly, he could alert them to his presence and ruin everything. Elon sat back for a moment, weighing his options. He had come here to uncover the truth, but the situation was far more complex than he had anticipated. These were not the kind of people you could simply confront and expect an easy answer. He wasn't dealing with a straightforward situation, this was something that required tact, a careful unraveling of a delicate thread. Taking a deep breath, Elon decided to wait. He would let the woman and the girl settle into their home, or whatever this place was, before making his move. He had to be methodical. The last thing he wanted was to make a misstep that would end this investigation before it truly began. Another 10 minutes passed. As the sky shifted from pale blue to deep purple, Elon finally saw a flicker of light coming from inside the house. A small window in the front of the building illuminated, casting a soft glow onto the cracked sidewalk. He watched, his heart beating faster with anticipation. Then, a figure appeared in the window, one of the figures from earlier. It was the woman, her face now illuminated by the soft light from inside. She appeared to be talking to someone, but Elon couldn't make out the words. The curtain fluttered as she pulled it back slightly, perhaps just for a moment to look outside. Elon remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. He was too far away to hear anything, but he could see the gestures, the subtle movements of her hands, as if she were explaining something. Then, she stepped away from the window, and the room fell back into shadow. Elon waited, his mind working through possible scenarios. What were they doing in there? Were they editing the footage from earlier, or was there something else going on inside that house, something that was more than just a social experiment? Elon had an idea. There was a network of contacts that could help him, people who could dig deeper into the story without causing suspicion. If there was a real story here, he needed help to get to the bottom of it. Without hesitation, Elon reached for his phone. He opened a secure messaging app and typed a brief message to one of his trusted associates. I need you to look into something for me. It's urgent, and I need it done discreetly. There's a girl in a red dress involved. I think we've got a situation here. Send me everything you can find. Fast. He hit send and sat back, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing as he realized that he wasn't going to have to do this alone. He would have answers soon enough. But as Elon sat there, waiting for a reply, he couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were higher than just the girl. This wasn't just about one person, or even one family. There was something much larger at play here, something that involved the community, exploitation, and the darker side of society that many, especially people in his position, preferred not to acknowledge. But he had seen enough to know that the truth wasn't always visible on the surface, and sometimes it took a little digging to reveal what was hidden in the shadows. His phone buzzed, and Elon picked it up with a sense of urgency. It was a message from his associate. The investigation had begun. But before he could read the details, something caught his eye. A figure had emerged from the house, a shadowy figure walking briskly down the street. Elon's heart skipped a beat. Had they seen him? No. They were too far down the street for that. But it seemed like something was about to happen. The sense of foreboding only grew. Elon couldn't help but wonder what he had just stepped into. The unforeseen revelation. As Elon Musk sat in the shadowed corner of his vehicle, watching the figure retreat into the night, he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something major was slipping through his fingers. His pulse quickened, and for a moment, he considered chasing after the mysterious person. But then the calm rationality he was known for took over. Patience, Elon, he reminded himself. Patience. He glanced down at the phone, which buzzed with a new message. It was his associate's report, and as he opened the message, his breath caught in his throat. The brief summary was like a sudden punch to the gut. What he had feared was true, there was far more to this situation than he had realized. The girl in the red dress wasn't just part of some harmless social experiment. She had been part of a much darker operation, one that had been running beneath the radar of the city's more affluent citizens, carefully orchestrated by people with far too much power. It wasn't just her, either. The woman, who had pretended to be her mother, was a key player in a larger trafficking ring, one that specialized in using children for scams and street performances to gather donations, money that was funneled into much more sinister activities. The report went on to explain that this particular operation had been functioning in the shadows of Austin for years, preying on the goodwill of citizens who thought they were helping those in need. But in reality, the money was being siphoned off to fund criminal activities. Worse still, the girl, along with other children, had been coerced into participating, exploited and manipulated, their innocence twisted for financial gain. Elon's stomach churned. He had seen a lot in his life: disruptive technologies, corporate backstabbing, and world-changing ambitions, but nothing had prepared him for the gut-wrenching reality of what he was reading. It was a form of exploitation that preyed on the most vulnerable, and he couldn't turn a blind eye to it. He wasn't just going to let it happen. Not on his watch. He slammed the door of the Cybertruck, the engine purring to life as he floored the accelerator. The time for patience had passed. Elon was no longer interested in merely uncovering the truth, he was about to take action. He needed to confront the people behind this operation, to make them pay for what they had done, and to give the girl and others like her a chance at freedom. His phone buzzed again, and it was another message from his associate. This time, it included a name: Sandra Walker. The report confirmed that Sandra was the mastermind behind the operation. A former tech entrepreneur with a history of shady dealings, Sandra had vanished off the radar years ago after a series of failed businesses. It seemed she had reinvented herself as a philanthropist, running a front charity that masked her true intentions. Elon's eyes narrowed. He didn't just want justice. He wanted to put an end to this entire network, to expose the people who thought they were beyond the law. He quickly sent another message: get Sandra's location. We need to move quickly. The Cybertruck glided through the streets of Austin as Elon mentally prepared for the confrontation ahead. His mind was running calculations, going through all the possible scenarios. He wasn't sure how Sandra would react, but he knew one thing: she wasn't going to just give up her operation without a fight. Elon wasn't the type to back down from a challenge, though. If anything, this would be his greatest opportunity to apply his drive, his resources, and his intellect to an issue that really mattered. This wasn't just about building cars or rockets. This was about saving lives. Minutes later, a reply came through, confirming Sandra Walker's location in a remote area on the outskirts of the city. Elon didn't hesitate. The night was already setting in, the streets emptying out as most of the city's inhabitants retreated into their homes. This was his moment. He followed the directions on the GPS, the sleek lines of the Cybertruck cutting through the quiet roads. As the miles ticked away, he found himself thinking about the girl. Her eyes, those sad and weary eyes, had haunted him since the moment he'd seen her. There was a profound sense of loss in them, an innocence stolen before it could even be fully realized. Elon could feel it, deep in his gut. And he promised himself, right then and there, that he would make sure her future was better than the life she had been living. He wasn't just going to expose the criminal operation, he would help her escape it. The darkened landscape began to change. The city's lights grew faint, replaced by the harsh, artificial glow of streetlights far apart from one another. The roads narrowed and became less well-kept. Elon's grip on the steering wheel tightened as the Cybertruck's headlights illuminated the pathway forward. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Elon arrived at the designated location. It was a rundown compound, surrounded by high fences and an array of broken-down vehicles strewn across the dirt lot. The place looked abandoned at first glance, but Elon could sense there was life here, dark, hidden life. He parked the truck several yards away from the entrance and quietly stepped out, checking to ensure he wasn't seen. He approached the compound cautiously, using his intuition to guide him. His heart pounded, and his mind raced. What would he find inside? What kind of people was he about to confront? Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence. Looking for something? Elon spun around. A man stood at the edge of the compound, his features obscured by the darkness, but his posture tense, aggressive. Elon's mind worked quickly. This wasn't going to be a casual conversation. The man was a guard, and he wasn't about to let Elon waltz in. Just here to see Sandra, Elon replied, his tone calm but firm. He didn't have time for games, and he wasn't about to back down. The guard stepped forward, his hand resting near his waist, as though ready to pull out a weapon. Elon stood his ground, his eyes cold as steel. He knew that if things went south, it was going to get ugly, but he wasn't prepared to leave without doing what needed to be done. Then, in a flash, the situation escalated. Before the guard could make another move, a loud, commanding voice came from behind him. "Stop right there, and you might live to tell the story." Elon turned. And there she was. Sandra Walker stood in the doorway of the compound, her posture exuding authority and control. She was no longer the well-put-together philanthropist. The real Sandra was now barefaced, surrounded by her own web of lies. She wore a smirk, like she was untouchable. "Elon Musk," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm surprised you've come all the way out here. You should have stayed in your tech bubble where you belong. But you're here now. What do you think you're going to do about it?" Elon's eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. "I'm going to make sure this stops. Today." He reached for his phone and activated the emergency protocol he had set up with his team. Within seconds, several unmarked vehicles pulled up, and armed authorities poured out. Sandra's smirk faded as the reality of her situation set in. "You don't understand," she hissed. "You think you're some kind of hero? This is bigger than you. You can't stop it." But Elon, unfazed, simply shook his head. "The world's changing, Sandra. And the people who think they're beyond it? They're the first to go." As the authorities took Sandra and her accomplices into custody, Elon felt a strange weight lifting off his shoulders. It wasn't the end he had imagined, but it was the beginning of something better for that girl in the red dress and all the others who had been exploited. He knew that they would have a chance now, a chance at a real future, one where they weren't defined by the lies that had been forced upon them. As the night grew darker, Elon drove back to the city, knowing that his actions today had made a difference. Not just for one girl, but for many. In a world that often seemed broken, it was small victories like these that reminded him why he did what he did, to change the world, one life at a time. And as for Sandra? Her empire was crumbling. But in the end, it was the girl in the red dress who would be free. The girl who, in her innocence, had started a chain of events that no one, not even Elon Musk, had predicted.